really quite crucial for the functioning of the administration. There was no backfighting, there was no infighting, there was no backstabbing, there was no leaking. This, of course, runs really contrary to one of the most powerful arguments that occurred when George W. Bush was president, which was the arrival of a new book by Doris Kearns Goodwin on Abraham Lincoln called Team of Rivals, which suggested, of course, that the way you put a good administration together is you get people who don't like each other and don't get together because the tension will create greater creativity. Now, the point of that book is that Lincoln's genius is that he brought people together who could not get along, and therefore they won the war. The story which I and others will tell you is that Bush brought people together who got together, and therefore they won the war. This tells us, if nothing else, that the way history is written depends upon how things turn out. But I would caution you when thinking about the solidarity and the camaraderie of the Bush administration that we have a word in, if I may, I'm not a political scientist, but we have a word in political sciences for when we have individuals who all think alike, all act alike, and all come from the same cut of cloth. We call that a cabal. And that's not necessarily a word that's associated with the good functioning of government. So when we look back at the Bush administration being so successful, I think it's not necessarily that they were friends that tells us why they were successful and that they were able to get along. It's that they had smart people doing the right jobs and on the same page. And the fact that they weren't backfighting, I think, is important. But it doesn't necessarily give us the whole answer.
Master Natsios, you get the last word here on the factor.
Yes, let me just add something to that, Jeff, where I would disagree with you slightly. I think half of foreign policy, maybe 2/3, is not actually the decision that's made, it's the implementation of the decision. Armitage used to say, any decision is better than no decision. And if you make a decision and you have skilled people who are focused on the details, who get along with each other, share information, work together, work out, you can actually make what is a mistaken policy work. If you make the right decision and you have people constantly infighting, and I've been in both situations, by the way, if you have the right decision made but implemented in a really dysfunctional way, you will make the right decision blow up. Mm-hmm. So I actually don't agree with Doris Kearns Goodwin. I think Lincoln was a genius for many other reasons, but that wasn't one of them. I think that the camaraderie of the administration in Bush 41 led to a brilliant execution in each place. It's when they decided not to engage that they made mistakes, like Bosnia, Panama. When they engaged in Panama the second time, it was a brilliant success, actually. Yeah. Yeah. And so each of the interventions they made, all of them worked. The problem was them, in the case of Afghanistan, getting up and leaving and not engaging. So I think the reason that it worked was because they did the implementation well.
So I have to completely agree on the implementation idea. I think that's exactly right. One caveat, if you will, to your caveat, is to think about the difference between strategic thinking at the broadest level and implementation. Because I think one of the major critiques that we have of the Bush administration, which, by the way, I wholeheartedly disagree with, is that the New World Order was not new and was not particularly visionary. I actually have a lot of respect for what they were doing in the outlining what the New World Order was, and I think it actually was outlined relatively well. By virtue of having people who have largely the same experience, Baker, Scowcroft, Gates, so on and so forth, from the largely the same educational institutions who look at the world a lot alike, I think it's not surprising that they don't come up with something that's particularly innovative. Now, I think the best thing they ever did was to come up with something that was not particularly innovative. But at the very least, if this was a moment where we needed innovation, this group was unlikely to produce it. Yeah. But implementation, you're absolutely right.
We have time for a brief question and a brief answer from Pasha.
Very brief.
Pasha.
So if implementation is the key here, right? The theme here is Scowcroft's operational style. Was there something about follow-up and implementation that Scowcroft put in to the national security decision-making process in a bureaucratic way that helped in that implementation? Or is this just They implemented it because they were all smart people who knew what to do.
Who kept the Pentagon in their box, I think is what he wants to know.
Two answers to that. The first is, I think the real key to being a successful national security advisor is to have Bob Gates as your deputy. He was remarkably good at keeping people on
You know your
task
audience well.
and in their box. Well, it has the added advantage, as Kissinger would say, has the added advantage of being true. And in fact, Gates did something really smart in that he convened a deputies meeting weekly and sometimes bi-weekly and as needed, so that all the people who were advising their principals could get together and hash things out. But he almost always had that meeting in the West Wing and would more often than not find reason to leave the meeting because he wanted to go ask the president something in the Oval Office. Nobody else in the room was allowed to go into the Oval Office. And by doing that, he therefore demonstrated frequently that he was more important than the rest of them, which is a really good deputy to have, therefore. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. So.
Well, thank you, Jeff. You managed to connect Scowcroft to Bismarck, and it was an interesting conversation.
Thank you, Jason.